Welcome to Pure Dialogue series, a podcast where it's engineer to engineer. No filter, no fluff, just honest conversations, stories, and insights from the world of tech. Hi, I am Anisha Julka, and I'll be your host for today's episode where we talk about how careers at Pure Storage look like. And our guest for today is Mr. Ajay Singh, who is the Chief Product Officer at Pure Storage. Ajay has an overall experience of 25 years in the software and services industry. From leading at companies like VMware, HP, and Pure Storage, of course, to building successful startups like ProActiveNet. Also, with a background from IIT Kanpur, Carnegie Mellon, and Stanford University, he brings a unique mix of leadership vision and engineering depth. Welcome to the Pure Dialogues, Ajay. We are so glad to have you here with us.
Thanks, Anisha. Happy to be here.
So, Ajay, moving ahead with the questions, I just talked about your career journey and it's so inspiring. So, I'm pretty sure that our listeners would love to know that what were some of the pivotal moments in your career path that really helped shape it.
I started my career as an engineer at Tandem Computers, and then I decided that I wanted to go a little bit more on the business side. So got engaged in a startup, subsequently went to business school, then went all the way on the business side working for Booz Allen and Hamilton in strategy consulting. Decided no, I want to be back on the product side, came back to Sun Microsystems, then founded a startup company after that. We sold it to BMC Software, then joined another startup. We sold it to Intuit. Then I said, well, I think I'm going to work at big companies now. Yeah. So I worked at HP, then VMware, and now at Pure Storage. So I've been a combination of technical and business side. And for me, a key pivotal moment in my journey was really the art of how do you manage and motivate a large team. The learning I had when I was at Booz Allen, one of the advantages of Booz Allen is, they only get people from the top business schools, Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, etc. You're working in this environment, which is kind of artificial with these amazingly bright people, and you're giving them, it's an up or out culture. So, as they're moving out, the ones that are not cutting it are moving out. These are top talent not cutting it. So your bar tends to be very high. And when I transitioned into Sun Microsystems, then I've started to run my first big 125-person organization, I found that I was keeping my bar really high, and to the point where people were feeling like they're never going to meet this bar. And soon I started to see churn happening in the organization. Tough realization on me was really the objective is not only to keep a high bar, but then to also understand everybody, their capability, what they're good at, not to dwell on their weaknesses, but to focus on their strengths and make sure they're thriving with their strengths and really build a team that complements each other's strengths. That was kind of a big learning for me, and I've used that. And, it's important that in large organizations, as you get more senior, to be able to corral the team, focus them on an objective, and then row like an Olympic rowing team, all pulling in the same direction, as opposed to Brownian motion going in that direction, right? And so that's the difference between a high-performing team and a okay performance team. You could have rock stars, but they're arguing with each other all the time and not aligned. You'll be Brownian motion. And an average Joe Blow team, which is aligned and rowing in the same direction, will beat them. Yeah. Of course, we're trying to build a team of rock stars and great alignment at Pure Storage.
That's incredible to hear, Ajay. And like you mentioned, that how supporting each other and having conversations with each other can really help you grow, right? Yeah. What, according to you, makes a great career conversation between a manager and a team member?
I think the number one principle in a great conversation between a manager and their team member is the team member to feel like the manager is squarely in their camp. They are rooting for them, they're wanting them to succeed, they're coaching them to make that happen. Right, and now if we flip to the manager side, what are the objectives of the manager? The objective of the manager is they might assess somebody and they say, look, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're a 7. And I feel they fit well with the skill set they have. They're doing things they're good at. The objective is, how do I take that from a 7 to an 8 to a 9 to a 10, right? So you've got already somebody with the right skill set. It's a big opportunity to start to coach them and see how they can improve. There's a great book on this. We've recommended this in the past to managers. It's called weekly coaching conversations. There's a book actually that Charlie had recommended. I forget the name of the author. We can get that to the team offline.
Perfect.
And it's, even though it's set not in engineering, it's set in sales, the principle still applies, that the employee should feel like you are rooting for them to succeed. And obviously, look, if it turns out that you feel like the employee's skill set is it's a square peg in a round hole situation, then it's probably best for everybody to find, a square hole for this employee, which in another team or maybe outside the company. Most of the time, if you have the right team, hired well, and they are fit well, you should mostly be just cheering the team along. And that's the Olympic rowing team, right? You're just cheering them along. Well done. And they're all aligned and going. And that's how you get great performance.
That was really insightful, Ajay. And you know what? It is resonating since I also just completed 1 year at Pure Storage. And what has stood for me as well is how the culture is so good at Pure. Whatever you mentioned, that you should always be there as a cheerleader for your team, and you should always encourage the open and honest conversations. So I just want you to describe the culture at Pure as well, like how it feels to be at Pure Storage.
I love the culture at Pure. One of the reasons I joined Pure. It's a culture, where we want to make sure that every employee is very comfortable with who they are and how they come at work, right? Feel very supported, feel like they can rise to their full potential. So that's really important. Now, as part of that, it's important to have open conversations, right? Because there's always opportunity. I'm on a constant learning journey. There's always things that I can improve upon in area that I want to thrive in.
Right.
I can do things better. That's for everybody, right? So, and I always encourage managers to, start with the positives. Everybody has some great positives. Start with, recognizing the positives. When you do that, the employee opens up to coaching.
Yeah.
Then they say, look, this manager cares about me. They recognize my positives. They obviously have their, my interest at their heart.
Exactly.
They will open up and will listen to you and respond to you more, right? So this culture is that of sort of openness, collegial culture. It's not a hierarchical culture. It's a, discussion of ideas. That's why we do hackathons, so people can submit their best ideas. Ultimately, we are trying to tap into, it's not like Cause or me or Charlie has all the answers, right? I mean, we're looking on the team and we want to encourage them to think out of the box and be innovative, and we want to harness that and encourage that. It's the collection that wins ultimately, right? The team wins.
Exactly. And I think that's why we have a career week also in Pure
Yes.
Storage. Ajay, I think that gives a very clear picture of how it feels to be at Pure, right? And I think culture also influences how and which career paths we choose, right? So how about you walk us through a managerial or a technical career path at Pure Storage?
We're not unique there. Some other technology companies do that as well. So we have a technical path and a managerial path. And it's again on that same principle of making sure there's an opportunity for people to feel comfortable with what they're good at.
Yeah.
And some people, really want to go deep into technology and architecture. But in both paths, ultimately you have to evolve to be a leader. There's no escaping that, right?
Exactly.
So on the technical path, you still need communication skills to be able to persuade people on why the architectural direction should be A versus B, be able to debate with the CTO organization and other technical folks and collaborate with them and, be a leader there and, be a follower where one needs to be a follower, right? And so, build all those leadership skill sets on the technical ladder as well. And then in the managerial ladder, on the other hand, you also, are trying to motivate and manage your team to be a high-performing team. So, how you give feedback, how you align your goals to your next level org's goal, to the goal above that, ultimately to Charlie's and the company's goal, that alignment and showing that connection from the company goal to how what you're working on is furthering the company goal. That is also the job of a manager, right? To figure that out. In addition to people manager, being a coach and all of that, and ultimately being a team player, right? I always, give this one piece of advice to all employees. It's we have a lot of software talent, and this is about, how do you solve for when you're in sort of debating, do I go left or do I go right? Is left or right, which is better for the customer? So you first solve always for the customer, right? Then you say, okay, both are pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, which is then better for Pure, left or right? So maybe both are pretty good too. Okay, which is then next best for PBG because I'm in that bigger organization. So you work your way that which is the best for if I'm CPP, for CPBU, which is the best for FA or my organization. Finally, which is the best for me? Your best for me is always the last. Because when you solve like that, you are demonstrating you're a team player, you're a customer first thinker. Everybody notices that. And those are the kind of people that become leaders of the future, right? So it's a good algorithm to follow, in your career path.
And I think it's such a thoughtful advice, not only for the Pure employees, but for all the people out there. It's going to be very helpful, Ajay. I think what I have observed in my career journey is a lot of people at one point of time, they just feel stuck. They're like, we don't know how to move forward, right? So what is one piece of advice that you would like to give to someone who's in this situation?
Yeah, so look, there's always opportunities for leadership everywhere.
Yeah.
Before I get into the advice for that, I'm just going to make a general comment, which is, as you progress in your career path and rise up the leadership level, whether it's technical or managerial, it's really important that you be curious about the business you're in.
Yeah.
You can't be like, hey, I'm just designing this database and that's all I do and I just care about that and I'm a great technician and that's it and then I go home. You got to be saying, okay, I'm building this database, but how does that help the company and how does it help our customers? So be curious. And I would say answer these 4 questions. Who's the customer? For Pure, who buys our products? You should be curious about that because it's paying for your salaries, paying, you get stock and all that good stuff. Why do they buy? What's the pain point that they're dealing with? Why do they buy? Right? Understand that. This is the pain point because you'll get a lot of personal satisfaction, right? If you can serve somebody in reducing the pain for them, one human being serving another human being, reducing the pain, that feeling of serving gives you a lot of satisfaction. So it's important to connect into your customer, right? Why? Then who's the competition? Because ultimately, customer has choices. So we have to say, what are the other choices they have?
Yeah.
What are their strengths and weaknesses? How do they stack up against our strengths and weaknesses? And then ultimately, what is our strategy to win? And maybe you won't have all the answers, but be curious.
Yeah.
Ask your product managers, ask your manager. Try to understand what is our strategy to win, in this environment to satisfy that customer better than anybody else, right? Now, if you do that, there's a lot of opportunities when you want to win to be a leader. So if you're stuck in your career, look for an opportunity to do something transformative, right? Take on a project that, if you spot something that, hey, I can add value here, maybe your manager hasn't assigned it to you, take it to your manager and say, hey, I think, because you're curious, you're talking to your product managers, I think I could do this. I'll give you an example. Very early in my career, I was a software engineer in the performance group, and the field, I was talking to product managers and some SEs, and the field was saying, hey, we had this monitoring product, and the only way you can consume this monitoring product was through the API and through the UI of this monitoring product, product called X-Ray. And the field was saying, hey, it would be great if we could take the output of this through an API, and then we could feed it into our own reporting tool. And, they kept asking for it like an RFE. And since I knew the product, and I said, I could crank it out pretty quickly. So I went to my manager, I said, it's okay on the weekends and all, I'll work a little extra, and I'm going to crank this thing out. And I did it, and the field was really appreciative, and they were like super happy. That's an example of, so the manager probably noticed that, saying, hey, this guy's taking an initiative, he's a go-getter, he's aggressive, he wants to do it. So that's important. And that's how you can get noticed and participate in a hackathon. Come up with some good creative ideas there, right? So there are many ways to get noticed, and there's a lot of opportunities to improve, right? So typically, in any career, the first step is you want to make sure that the job you assigned, you're doing that well. But then if you do that well, generally, a lot of people say, oh, well, we should keep him in the job or her in that job because they do it so well. But then if you also take the next step and you're curious and looking around and you say, you know what, here's an opportunity to do something even better. I can suggest a change in process. I can suggest the change and the status quo. If you start to do that type of thing, then people, oh, this is actually a leader. They are trying to lead us in a better direction, right? So that's how you get noticed. So first do your job really well, but then be curious. That is really important. Be curious.
Yeah, so you mean the opportunities are always
They are
there.
there.
You just know when and how to go and grab
Yes.
it.
And if you're curious and
Yeah.
you're talking,
Yeah.
there are lots of opportunities around. Lots of
Exactly.
opportunities.
That was
Yeah.
insightful, Ajay.
Yeah.
And I think that brings us to the end of the conversation. And just to wrap it up, if you could just leave our listeners with one key practice that they can use to, take charge of their career. So what would it be?
I think the key practice is no matter what you do, be curious and be business aware. That will set you apart because no matter which leader you want to write as a technical leader, you look at, folks like Rob Lee, he's a businessman.
Yeah.
He's super smart technically.
Of course.
He's
Yeah.
been very curious about the business. He'll tell you and look at in-depth analysis of the install base, which has got nothing to do with technology, but he's curious about the business, right? So be very curious about the business, no matter what role you are in. You're a QA engineer, you're a developer engineer, you're an architect, you're a product manager, any particular field, you're TPM, doesn't matter. Be curious about the business, understand those 4 questions. Who's the customer? Why do they buy? Who's the competition? Why will we win? Or what's our winning strategy? That's important.
Awesome, Ajay. Thank you so much for this valuable conversation. And I think all the people who are listening to us are going to walk away with a clear picture on how to navigate their career paths. For all the people who have tuned in, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode.